What's up, YouTube? This is Uncommon Ramen. Before I get into the video, let me remind you that if you like my videos, please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, if you want to be notified when these videos hit the internet, hit the bell icon. And finally, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. All right, so we're looking at a deck tech today. I challenged myself some time ago. If you watch my videos pretty religiously, you'll know, to build at least one deck in every color pairing, every color wedge, and every color shard. And so we're finally getting to the final color pairing that I didn't have built, which is Selesnya. And there's a reason behind it. It's one of my least favorite color pairings. So this was a difficult decision to make. I wasn't sure what kind of Selesnya deck I wanted to build. We decided to go for Torsten. Yeah, as my commander. This guy's 7 cost, so I don't know if it was the smartest idea, but it was the only thing that I found at the time that was tolerable to me. So here's Torsten. We're going to go ahead and just take a look at that. Just break it down. All right, Torsten, founder of Benalia, is 5 a green and a white, so 7 cost, 7/7. When it enters the battlefield, you get to look at the top 7 cards of your library and keep any amount of creatures or lands from there, and the rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. So what we're focusing on here is a very creature-heavy deck. I would say close to half. I wouldn't say fully half, but very close to half the cards in here are creatures. And in order to really take advantage of the ability that Torsten has, we also have a ton of flicker effects in here. So if you're not aware of what a flicker effect is, it's when a card says exile target card and have it return to the battlefield immediately. And that just basically renews the card as kind of a new card. When it comes back as basically a clean slate. So in the case of Torsten, when he gets flickered, he'll do his ability again. Torsten has another interesting upside in that when he dies, he creates 7 1/1 tokens, which is fantastic for replacing himself. But we got to try and make sure he doesn't die all that often. Because, as mentioned, he has a casting cost of 7, which means the first time he dies, it's going to cost you 9 to bring him back, then 11, and then 13, and so on. So a large portion of this deck also is going to be fetching for lands, and we'll get into that right now. So we're going to look at the creatures. The creatures are the only thing that I've divided into groups because the rest of the cards, there's very few of anything else. There's not that many instants, not that many sorceries, not that many artifacts, not that many enchantments. So the biggest part of the deck is the creatures, so I've decided to split those into groups, starting with dorks, following into flicker effects, then we have draw card effects, and then we're going to have, I think, 2 categories for support, ETB support, and then just regular support. So we're going to jump into the mana dorks right now, starting with Llanowar Elves. So we're going to run quite a few mana dorks. You can see that right here. Because again, Torsten costs 7, and being able to recast him is going to be difficult. But on top of that, you also just have to cast him the first time to begin with. So any amount of mana dorks and mana ramp that you can get going helps you bring Torsten in sooner. Okay, so we have Llanowar Elves. We have Fintorn Elves, or Findhorn Elves, however you guys want to pronounce that. We have Elvish Mystic. We have Birds of Paradise. We have Arbor Elf, which is, it's kind of not a mana dork, but it is. You can tap to untap a forest, so you can tap a forest twice. And then finally we have Avacyn's Pilgrim. These are all 1-cost mana dorks to help just get that early ramp going. Next thing we're going to look at is the different creatures that blink. So starting with the Restoration Angel, this one's very important because it has flash as well. And basically, it's just going to blink well, it's going to blink something on ETB. In this case, a non-angel creature. So this is perfect for targeting Torsten, but there's a couple other things you can target in here, which is why it's really important that it has flash. We have Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp is kind of the OG of blinking, or flickering, if you will. But same thing, it's just a flyer with flicker effect on it. We have Felidar Guardian, another flicker effect on here. Just a 1/4. We have Emiel the Blessed. Emiel the Blessed is cool because this is a walking flicker effect, so this guy is going to stick on the field, and you can pay 3 at any point in time to flicker something. It also has a ETB thing, well, a support thing in the sense of whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay a green or white hybrid to give it a +1/+1 counter. So is it +1/+1 counter on Emiel? Yeah, on the creature that ETBs. That can be good and bad. When you flicker something, they lose all their +1/+1 counters. So obviously you're going to want to target something that you're not intending to flicker. But it's still a very interesting support ability. We have Eldrazi Displacer. This is another walking flicker. This one sits on the field, and if you pay 2 and a colorless, you get to flicker something. There are colorless sources in here, so it's not impossible to do this multiple times. And then I believe last but not least, we have Charming Prince. And Charming Prince is actually an ETB support as well. Not only can we use it to flicker something on ETB, but we can also use it to gain life and scry too. So as we get later in the strategy, there is an infinite combo that can pop off, and this is one of the targets that you can use to continuously bring back for infinite life or infinite scry if you want. Okay, so that was our flicker effects. Then the next effects are going to be creatures that allow card draw just solely. Because I think there's 1 or 2 others that are on ETB, but we're just going to go into these guys. We got Archivist of Ogma. This guy has flash. Whenever an opponent searches their library, you get to gain 1 life and draw cards. So anytime your opponents go to fetch lands or tutor, this is going to allow you to gain a life and draw a card. It's very powerful in Commander because tutors are kind of a big part of Commander. So this is just a really good card. And then finally we have Beast Whisper. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you get to draw a card. So you're going to be doing that quite a bit. I don't believe flickering counts as casting, but you're still going to be casting them before they get a chance to get flickered. So you still get to take advantage of the Beast Whisper. And since a majority of the deck is creatures, you're going to get that ability quite a bit. Next up, we're going to have the ETB creatures. These are ETB support, so these are the ones that you're going to flicker often. And part of this is, I think this one's just... Okay, I have this separated into 2 different categories. The front part here is going to be all the stuff that ETBs for land fetch, and the back stuff is ETBs for different stuff. So Farhaven Elf, pretty simple. When it ETBs, search your library for a basic land. Springbloom Druid, when it ETBs, sacrifice land, search your library for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Topiary Stomper, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tapped. Topiary Stomper also, when there is 7 or more lands, it can attack, basically. Because otherwise it can't. Or block, for that matter. Wood Elves, pretty simple. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a forced card, put it into play. Yasharn does a couple things here. When it ETBs, obviously we get to search for a basic land, or basic forest and basic plains. But also players can't gain life, can't pay life, my bad, or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. So this is really good against most black decks that take advantage of well, heck, actually at this point, Phyrexians too. Any of the Phyrexian mana says you pay life to cast. You can pay life to cast a spell. This will shut that off. It also says that you can't sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells. So like things like Fire Blast, stuff like that. Just think of those. You won't be able to do it. Plus anything that requires you to sacrifice a permanent as part of the cost, you just can't do. Then we're going to move into the ETB support that isn't for fetching. This is going to be N-Race Forerunners, 1 ETBs, +2/+2, and Vigilance and Trample to all your creatures, which is a great overrun effect. Not to mention it's stuck to a body, so this is 7/7 body. This is a great target for flickering to put on lots of aggressive pressure. We have Endurance. Endurance is interesting. So both incarnations that are in this deck, you can actually evoke them. And this is where the Flash Angel becomes very important, because when you evoke them, after they've resolved, they go away like a spell. However, if you hold priority and you flicker it, it comes back as if it wasn't evoked. So it'll just come back and sit on the battlefield, and at that point becomes just a permanent flicker target at that point. Endurance, maybe you don't want to do that necessarily specifically for that one, but when we get to the other one, you'll see why. But when Endurance enters the battlefield, up to one target player puts all cards from their graveyard on the bottom of their library. So this is a great way to get rid of a graveyard. Yes, you're putting it back into the library, but the likelihood of them getting down to that particular set of cards is pretty low unless they're playing self-mill strat. And also, this actually saves your graveyard too. So if somebody's trying to graveyard hate your stuff, you can actually kind of save it, since you are very likely to get lower quicker than most people, especially if you keep flickering Torsten. So just a really good way to get around things. Not to mention it has reach and it's 3/4 body. And again, if you evoke it and then you hold the priority on it resolving, you can just flicker it and it comes back just as a creature. The next up, we have Eternal Witness, and this is the reason why you might want to use Endurance to try and save your stuff, just in case, because you have Eternal Witness to help you bring your cards back. If somebody's trying to graveyard hate you, you can use Endurance to get rid of your graveyard so that they can't just exile it. Because we don't have Eternal Witness in here for nothing. We have Eternal Witness in here because we want to bring stuff from our graveyard back. So just a strategy piece there. Then we have Knight of Autumn. When it ETBs, it gets to put 2 +1/+1 counters on itself, or destroy target artifact or enchantment, or gain 4 life. Again, great flicker target for destroying artifacts and enchantments. Great flicker target for gaining life if we get to that infinite combo, where we can just gain infinite life at that point. Then we have Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide is part of the infinite combo. So when I get to the pieces, I'll just let you know as I see them. When Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, you get to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's pretty solid. Has Echo, so you don't necessarily need to keep it in play. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but it says right here, at the beginning of your upkeep, if it came under your control since the beginning of... So I don't think you can avoid the... echo effect by flickering it, but I'm open to listening to anybody who believes otherwise. And we have Reclamation Sage, another one where ETB's destroying artifact or enchantments, just great way for artifact enchantment hate. And we have Skyclave Apparition. Skyclave Apparition is really cool for cleaning up your opponent's board. Yes, when it leaves the battlefield, they get a little vanilla spirit with a power and toughness equal to casting cost, but the thing is that it's vanilla and it doesn't have flying. So even though it could end up potentially being a very large creature, it's not as if you couldn't chump block it, and this deck is going to be really good at that, or that you just couldn't deal with it some other way. And then again, if you blink this, blinking it allows you to take out multiple targets. Now, just keeping in mind that blinking counts as leaving the battlefield, so it'll just also replace the targets you're taking out with those little spirits. But again, the spirits are probably a lot less painful. Sorry, not spirits, illusions are probably a lot less painful than whatever it is you're trying to take out. So Skyclave Apparition here is really good. And then finally we have Solitude. Well, I guess this isn't finally, but we have Solitude, which is the real MVP in here. This is another one of those where if you evoke it and then you flash in something to flicker it, it sticks on the battlefield. But it acts like a Swords to Plowshares on legs. So if you continuously blink this thing, you can Swords to Plowshares your opponent's field willy-nilly. And the life gain that they gain from that is going to be inconsequential to the amount of stuff that you can get on the board and kill them with. Then we have Sun Titan, because Sun Titan's good. There's just no other thing to say about that. It's ETB plus on attack. You get to return permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Super good. We got Tristani Discordant. This was going to be in the support cards, but this one also has a really interesting ETB that can be really useful for flickering. Its ETB is 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink get put into play. And so if you flicker that continuously, you're just getting a ton of 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink, not to mention she has an Anthem. And then also, you know, Chaos decks suffer a little bit because you just gain control of your stuff that you own. Tristani Discordant is just really good in this deck. So the next set of creatures, and it's going to be the last set of creatures, is going to be all of the non-ETB support. So this is going to be like Anthems and stuff like that. So we're looking at Best Soul Nourisher. Best sees base power 1/1 and becomes bigger. And so that's going to see tokens, but that's also going to see other creatures in here that, like, for instance, the Findhorn Elves, the Llanowar Elves, all of them have a base power of 1/1. So she's just going to continuously get bigger because of that. And then when she attacks, every other creature that's attacking is going to get a bonus equal to the amount of +1/+1 counters on her. So she becomes really obnoxious really quickly. Then we have Champion of Lamholt. This one is super good because it sees creatures ETB, and it's not on cast, so it sees creatures ETB. So flickering does count for this, and it gets bigger. And then what it does is it makes it so that creatures with power less than Champion Lamholt's cannot block. So the higher power this is, the more stuff your opponents just can't block with, which can get deadly and force them to have to answer this. We have Gala Greeters. This is one of those... Oh, I guess this one doesn't draw cards. Never mind. So this one, again, sees creatures ETB, so flickering does count. And you can give it +1/+1 counters, create tap treasures, or gain 2 life. I'm not... It says right here, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. So I believe it only will ever see 3 per turn. But that's still really good value. Either way. Then we got Karametra. Again, this is in here for searching out plains and forests, just basically getting... does it just say plains and forest? It doesn't say basic. That's funny. Just so that we can get the lands out. The more ramp we get, the more often we can get Torsten in play, but also just the more stuff we can play during our turn. Unfortunately, this one is on cast and not on ETB, so it won't see the flicker effects, but it will see anything that you just cast. We got Mentor of the Meek. This one is ETB, and it sees whenever a creature with power 2 or less. So this also sees tokens coming into play. You pay 1, you draw a card. So this one was in here instead of in the draw card section because it requires an ETB to happen. But it's still a card draw engine here, and you only have to pay 1 to get it. Then we have Rumor Gatherer, another one that would be a card draw thing, but because it requires an ETB and because it's very limited on what it can do, I just put it into the support here. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. If this was the second time the ability was resolved, you get to draw a card instead. So this one is limited in the fact that only the second creature that ETBs, you get to draw a card, and then everything after that is just going to scry. But that's still every second creature ETBing drawing a card, so that's still pretty good. Then we have Soul Warden. Soul Warden is just really good in this deck in general because of the flickering, just because it's a creature strategy. Every time a creature enters the battlefield, gain a life. And that's... It says whenever any other... Yeah, that's even if your opponent puts something in play too, so very good. Torrens, whenever you cast a creature spell, so this is on cast, you get a token. And again, that's not a big deal. That's really easy. The token has training. Torrens has training as well. So the tokens will slowly but surely get bigger. We have Guardian Faith. Guardian of Faith is in here for obvious reasons. When it ETBs, you get to get like a semi-Teferi's Protection ability going here, where it protects all your creatures. It doesn't necessarily protect you, but it saves your creatures, aside from Guardian, from board wipes. And Guardian only has a CMC of 3, which means a large portion of the resurrection effects in here will see it, including Sun Titan. We have Jaheira. This is a token strategy. So giving your tokens the ability to be mana dorks makes it even better, especially if we have to recast Torrens not Torrens, Torsten a billion times. But also just in general, good. We also have King Darien XLVIII. I don't know. I know X is 10. I know the V is 5, and the I's are ones each, but I don't know what the L is, so sorry. This one is an Anthem. You can put +1/+1 counters on Darien and then create soldier tokens with him, and you can just sacrifice him to give your tokens hexproof and indestructible. So while it's not going to be Guardian of Faith level where we're going to protect the entire board, we can protect our tokens, and in this strategy it's pretty much the most important part. So just a great way to protect your tokens. And again, CMC of 3, so Sun Titan and the other recursion effects will see that. Then we got Maja Bredegard Protector. So this one's really good too, especially once you get your Flicker strategy online. Maja Bredegard sees every land that comes into play and creates a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Not to mention it's a Anthem effect. So when you're flickering your land fetch abilities, she's gonna put in a large portion of tokens just because of that. So super good in here. And then Revelark is part of the infinite combo. Revelark says when it leaves the battlefield, return 2 target creature cards with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So what you're doing here is you have Ashnod's Altar in play with Revelark in play and Karmic Guide in play. And what you're going to do is sacrifice a Karmic Guide and sacrifice some other creature with mana cost 2 or less, which you don't have to. The Karmic Guide is the most important part. And then you sacrifice the Revelark. So you're going to get infinite mana because the Revelark is then going to allow you, when it gets sacrificed, to return 2 creatures with power 2 or less. Sorry, power 2 or less. My bad. You could target most of this deck at this point. And that includes Karmic Guide. So you return the Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide enters the battlefield and returns the Revelark. Then you just sack them again in order where Karmic Guide gets sacked first, and then Revelark, and then repeat the process over and over again. You get infinite leaves the battlefield, infinite enters the battlefield, infinite colorless mana. And that's really important for some of the enchantments in here, as well as just some of the creatures in general in here, like seeing ETB. And like, for instance, Champion of Lambholt will see that and become infinitely large, and also make it impossible for you to block. There's just a ton of really great strategies around that whole thing. So, Revelark. Then we got Safi Eriksdottir. Safi Eriksdottir, when it gets sacrificed, you can target a creature that is put into your graveyard this turn and return to the battlefield. So it's a way of getting Torsten back if you don't want to pay the mana cost again. And then we have Shalai, Voice of Plenty. Shalai, Voice of Plenty is just an outright mean card in here. It gives you, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control hexproof, which is just incredible. So you have to target the Shalai first. And then for 4 and 2 green, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. In a token strategy, when you're trying to swing wide, the more powerful the tokens are, the deadlier it gets for each one that goes unblocked. And so this just allows you to stack them. And when you have infinite mana, the only thing you need at that point is 2 green, which this deck is really good at producing. So that's the creatures in the deck. And like I said, it's a large portion of the deck. You can see right here, this is all just creatures. So the next thing we're going to look at is the small amount of instants, which I think there's 7 of them. I might be wrong. So these are pretty simple instants. They're almost all of them are just staples in general, but there's some in here that are specific because of the flicker strat. So Beast Within, just because, spot removal. We have Ephemerate, which is a fantastic flicker effect. You cast it, it flickers, it rebounds the next turn to flicker again. So, just incredible in the early game for getting more lands on the field if you flicker a ETB Search for Land. But also just in general, good throughout the course of the game with a ton of different things that have really good ETBs. We have March of Multitudes. This is a game-winning card. I don't know how else to put it. Unfortunately, they don't have haste. So if your opponents have a board wipe, you're gonna lose probably. But when you cast this, the convoke part of this is what really makes it incredibly good. Coupled with things like Ashnod's Altar, you can actually dump a lot of mana into this spell and make a huge amount of 1/1 tokens with lifelink. So just good card. Then we got Path for spot removal. We've got Sword Plowshares for spot removal. And then we have Worldly Tutor. I opted for this one over Alatomri's Call only because I had this one versus Alatomri's Call. But Alatomri's Call is acceptable as well and puts it into your hand as opposed to on top of your deck. Next, we're going to take a look at the sorceries. There are significantly less sorceries. I think there's, what, 5? Yeah. We have Austere Command. Another acceptable target in here would be Farewell. But Austere Command helps to protect you from... It can be a one-sided board wipe, essentially, depending on how late in the game it is. So just keep that in mind. We have Cultivate for land fetch. We have Kodama's Reach for land fetch. We have Nature's Lure for land fetch. And we have Rampant Growth for land fetch. Again, you need as many lands as possible. And you'll see when we hit the artifacts that there's at least one fast mana in here that I wouldn't typically use. We'll start with the Arcane Signet. We have the Ashnod's Altar because, first off, in a token strat, this is really good for getting a ton of extra mana. But also, secondly, because it goes infinite with Revlark and Karmic Guide. We have Mana Vault. This was the fast mana piece that I put in here. You need early mana. You need a lot of early mana. We'll just put it that way. And so the 3 on this allows you to cast Torsten much quicker than usual. Then we have Skull Clamp because it's a token strategy. It's a really good card draw. And then we have Soul Ring, which is fast mana, but also kind of just a staple in Commander in general. So that one's not unusual for me. And then the last thing we're looking at is enchantments. Starting with Beastmaster Ascension. Whenever a creature you control attacks, you get to put a counter on this, and when it has 7 or more counters, all creatures you control get +5/+5. So that makes tokens really deadly. And actually, that could shut out the game, depending on how late it is in the game. It's not unusual for this kind of a deck to be attacking. Like I said, we're trying to swing wide, so it doesn't matter how many tokens die in the process. Attacking is a key part of this. This could actually get up to 7 counters in one turn as well, which is really important because it's on attack. And so if you can activate it before blockers are even declared, then you actually get that extra power and toughness before they've even had a chance to do anything about it. We have Cathar's Crusade. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Or it's on each creature you control. Ooh, including it. Which is super good because, again, with the Revlark, Karmic Guide, Ashnod's Altar... infinite loop, this is just going to infinitely make all your creatures obnoxiously large if this is in play, and that's the enchantment that I was talking about. And we have Greater Good. You can sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. This is meant for some of the bigger creatures in the game, but also you could do it with tokens, but then you have to discard 3 cards, so just keep that in mind. Then we have Mirari's Wake. This is a mana doubler and a anthem. So just super, super powerful in here. When this is in play, it can get out of hand pretty quickly. Your opponents really do have to answer this when it gets in play. And then finally, we have Teleportation Circle, another permanent that stays in play that flickers. This one just says at the beginning of your end step, flicker an artifact creature you control. Super good. And once this is in play, it kind of does end up getting out of hand. And then finally, we're going to look at the basics and non-basics. We'll start with non-basics. We have Arctic Tree Line because we have Wood Elves. We have Boseiju. The channel ability is just too good. We have Bountiful Promenade, Crowdland for green-white. We have Branchloft Pathway, the modal double-faced green-white. Brushland, the green-white Painland. Canopy Vista green white check land that also has typings, which I think that was the second one. Yeah, Castle Garenbrig, because again the extra mana is really important here, and it's for creature spells in a creature deck. Command Tower for obvious reasons. Croson Verge helps you search for plains and forests. It doesn't say basic, so you can actually search for your Canopy Vista and your Arctic Tree Line if you want. Overgrown Farmland is a green-white check land. Radiant Grove, another one in here because of the Forest Plains basic ability, or basic land typings. Reliquary Tower for obvious reasons. Sun Petal Grove, green-white check land, the original. Temple Garden is green-white shock land that also has basic land typings. Windswept Heath, the fetch land for green-white. And finally, Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, which just turns everything into forests, which means that everything at that point becomes fetchable if you have something that specifically looks for non-basic forests. Super good. And then finally, our basic lands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 forests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plains. All right, so that is the Torsten, founder of Benalia Flicker deck. There are quite a few of these on EDH Rex. There's quite a few lists on there that just outright don't use Endurance or Solitude, and it's probably because both of them are obnoxiously expensive. But I'm sure that there are plenty of other much better green-white Flicker targets. This one was the deck I wanted to build because it felt pretty effective. I really enjoyed. I've played this a couple times. I've really enjoyed how it works. It does become a threat pretty quickly. It can be difficult to bounce back when your opponents team up on you, but there's some gratification to being teamed up on because you're a threat like that. But yeah, Torsten, founder of Benalia. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Let's keep it positive. I will be removing any negative comments. And yeah, that's it. Peace.